Do you believe in fate? For a group of nearly a dozen people to find each other and slot together seamlessly, a found family, not tethered together by constraints of a single season or even a simple tournament, but something that can grow to outlast the test of time itself. Amidst the chaos and drama of Season 2, slapped square in the center of the Intermediate Division, lies a diamond in the mud. One of the greatest underdog stories to ever grace these hallowed halls, and an impeccably strong first impression for this ragtag crew of rookies. This is the story of a team that may well exemplify the spirit of League Zero better than any other. A team that shone bright through fears and doubt, victory and defeat, tears and laughter together. This is the story of Yoink. In the early days of Season 2's preseason, as managers were being chosen, League Zero's staff decided to take a chance on a relatively unknown candidate. Kurt Lebert had been around since Season 1, being the main support for the Hangzhou Bark, but no one really knew what to think about him. If it wasn't for Hedwig singing his praises as a former teammate, he might have been overlooked entirely. But as fate would have it, he was given his chance. Acid was chosen as the captain, having been involved in the league since Season 0, as well as being on the Bark with Kurt the season prior.
That's actually a good question. Hold up. I could actually scroll back to the DM. Hangzhou. So I was originally on Z9 Season 1. I was the captain. And then I got traded to Hangzhou because I knew I didn't fit in that team because that team was way too stacked and I was not good enough to start. So I was like, I got traded to Hangzhou. And that's how I met Kurt. And then he saw me in tryouts, I think, and just talking, catching up. And I think he just asked me if I wanted to be the captain. I was like, of course. And then we came up with the name Yoink. I think he said he took Hangzhou Bark, and one of us said Yoink. And then we got told we couldn't take Hangzhou Bark, so then we went with Yoink.
Funnily enough, Kurt was unable to attend the first half of the draft due to an Open Division playoffs game happening around the same time. At the very least, Acid knew beforehand he would be alone for the beginning of the draft, and the team's management prepared a strategy to get them through the day.
It's really funny. It's mentioned like it's any OD game, but I'm pretty sure that OD game, if I had won it, would have brought me into top 16, which would have been crazy. But we lost it in like a 6-map, 2-3-1 like Giga Banger match. So as much as it was just an OD match, it was still crazy. And then I had to rebound off of that and then go into the draft. But for the draft itself, like me and Acid were already making a lot of plans together anyways, because I knew about the OD match coming up. So I knew he had to be there for the first couple bits of it. I think the only big thing that we disagreed on with the draft, I wanted to get Lechuga, Spork, whatever. Wanted to get her first just because I thought she was the best player. But Acid thought she was more slept on, and we ended up going for Luxie for our first round pick. But then I'm pretty sure Spork was immediately our second because I really wanted to get her on the team.
Unlike many of their counterparts in Season 2, Yoink went through a good amount of scouting to find those diamonds in the rough. Aside from Acid and Raging Cool, none of the other players were really well known to the rest of the community. The early predictions were pretty pessimistic against Yoink, but the team didn't let that change their plans.
Yeah, I think, and I was just messaging him like, hey, this guy got picked. Do we want to do him or him? Because we scouted, we watched scrims, we saw who we wanted. We had like 15, 20 players that we would definitely pick. And I know we had a priority list, and I think we got most of our priority picks because we definitely went for more of like the not as popular picks.
Aside from Raging Cool, the other big name in Yoink's draft was Luxie, a main tank player who, while new, was making somewhat of a name for himself during the preseason scouting bugs. Still not as much as most already known players from the previous seasons, but enough that management wanted to put an emphasis on getting him as early as possible.
Yeah, and Luxie was a higher rank, and naturally people are going to pick the higher ranks first. Orc was only 2.6, if I remember correctly. So it didn't really make sense to pick her first if we were going to do it based on how other people are going to pick. Because the main tank's important. I saw Luxie in scrims. I knew he could lead the team. So, it just felt smarter in the moment.
While Yoink and a few other intermediate teams had their eyes on him, Luxie himself was a little bit surprised to hear how desirable he ended up being.
No, I must have done a really good job at tryouts. This is the first time I've ever even heard of League Zero. I heard it from a friend in high school, actually, Laurer. And I was really passionate about Overwatch at the time. Just got my first PC, and showed up to as many scrims as possible, and went to a few Yoink ones because they always kept calling me back. And I was just, I don't know, I guess I hit it off with them. I was not even expecting to be drafted by them so early. I came in selection night just wondering what was going to happen, and boom, right away. I didn't have to wait anymore because I knew it was on the team. It was super cool.
When all was said and done, Yoink was predicted by their peers and neutral analysts to bring up the rear of the Intermediate B subdivision. However, the atmosphere inside the team painted a completely different picture. Management was thrilled by who they were able to bring on board.
My biggest soul pick was definitely Spork, and especially because she's grown into, like, she was able to hit 4.3 in Overwatch 1 and is like high Grandmaster nowadays, and this was when everyone was like Masters, right? So I'm super proud of that, but like players like Kern, I scouted out and I really wanted as well. Alligator Andre, known as Deflex nowadays, was really good. Zach was like I think we've told the story before, but Zach was just kind of a last minute, because we wanted to go through all of our draft picks because why not? And he was someone we picked up just kind of randomly, but yeah, like Lechuga, Kern, and Deflex at the very least from me. I wanted all of them.
Of course, the players were aware of how others saw their chances at being competitive, but for the most part, the early days post-draft went along pretty smoothly for Yoink.
So I remember most of the players from, like, I kind of made my own opinions of like the players just from like trialing with a bunch of teams, and basically everyone I knew except maybe like one or two were like really good individually. It's just because I had been there the past 2 seasons of League Zero, I had no idea who they were. So, and I think that was the opinion of like a lot of people, where it was like, okay, we know Kurt and Acid from Hangzhou Bark, and we know Raging Cool because he was on Easy Clap. Who is everyone else? They're probably bad. And I think that was the case for like everyone. And we all kind of just like realized that and accepted it. Like, I don't think anyone took it too harsh.
Just different from any other like draft team that I've been on. They were just pure fun because we started off with Doomfist parkour, and I think the only person that didn't like that was Lechuga. But like, yeah, after our first couple of scrims, me, Lechuga, and Kern Master, since I was a support then, we would just stay behind and chill. And so, you know, it kind of quickly became a chill group to where we would just stick around and game after. I don't know, the only word I can describe it is just pure fun and relaxed.
Well, immediately I was a bit hesitant because they actually, the first day we got drafted, we played Doom Parkour, and I was like, it's so over. They're all gonna hate me because I was really bad at Doom Parkour. But everyone was really friendly and very encouraging, and yeah, I don't know, it just got along pretty quickly.
Right off the bat, there was a little bit of awkwardness in figuring out exactly who was going to start and on what roles. In particular, Kernmaster was brought on as somewhat of an off-tank player with the possibility to be the backup main tank to Luxie. Normally he was used to playing the latter, but Luxie was far too good to bench. But management still valued Kern's ability to communicate in-game.
So I used to play main tank for the longest time, and then coming in from the draft, I used to play in GG&A, and for like 2 seasons I was a tank player, kind of main tank, mostly main tank. I came into the season drafted for tank, but as a backup for Luxie, because Kurt liked my comms, he said. Him and Acid liked my comms. And that actually goes into the week 1, where I'm put on off tank specifically. So Raging Cool was out, so we had to like kind of fill in our lineup. And so we put Zakatar on flex DPS, I recall. And they put me on off tank instead of having like PC scrub, or just have Zakatar play and have someone else on DPS, because they wanted me to calm, because they liked my comms, but my play wasn't like good enough to play main tank over Luxie. So that was a very interesting dynamic, but it was kind of just because our roster wasn't like there for the very first half. Well, so coming from GG&A was kind of like you sign up and you just kind of get put on a team. Like there's no like draft process. It was like season like 4 or 5, I think it was. So like you kind of just got like presented a team and you dealt with what you got. But for this like draft league, it's like we did the pugs, I did the pugs, and I was like, I felt like I put myself out there, but I didn't have any idea of where my stock was in the slightest. I thought I did well in pugs, but like I didn't know what I was doing really, because I've never done well in like organized teams at all really. So I tempered my expectations a lot. So just being picked up was super exciting, and then everyone was like, yo, what is this team? Like, nobody knows who like 90% of the players are, other than like Acid and Raging Cool, since they had been in the community. Oh, and Harry. I liked the idea of just being a sub because it was right before COVID happened, so I was still thinking like I need to make sure my school grades are still doing well. Like I'm fine with being here and just being a part to like grow as a player and just figure out what the hell to do in Overwatch, because it was like, what was this? It was 2020. I wasn't disappointed, and I was happy that the team was like welcoming. And for scrims, Luxie would get most of the minutes, but like I'd enjoy my 1 or 2 maps, and the team like wouldn't do like awful with me. And so I was like, hey, this is fun. If I ever need to like play the game, I will.
To make things 10 times harder for management, in the time leading up to the first week of games, Yoink suffered a few availability issues. Synergy was severely lacking, on top of Kurt and Acid not being super confident about who played the best Overwatch alongside everyone else. A few picks were obvious, namely Luxie, Acid, and Raging Cool, but much of everything else felt up in the air.
As much as I wasn't at every scrim, I do remember the first week being tough, and just like the first week being exciting because I was managing for the first time. But yeah, there were a lot of schedule issues, and I remember it was something I took from League Zero Season 1 as a player, where I was on a team where I was playing all of the scrims and then got benched for the matches, and I was like, what the hell, guys? And so I remember it was either week 1 or 2 where Raging was in that position where he wasn't able to show up for any of the scrims, but could show up to the game, and he probably was our best player. But I was just on the stance of like, we were scrimming with this lineup and we prepared for it. So that, that was the lineup we were going to play. But I do remember that lineup also just being weird. And I remember looking back on the week 1 game with some of the other people at Yoink together, and all of us collectively going like, what the hell heroes are we on? What roles are we on? I'm pretty sure we had Zach on DPS there.
Wait What was considered to be one of the frontrunners of the Intermediate Division as a whole, let alone the Intermediate B subdivision. With Yoink struggling to get a firm grasp on the basics, the team wasn't super confident about their chances during their big debut.
I don't even remember the confidence scale. I just knew that like it was going to be a struggle because it was a put together roster for like we didn't know who was going to show up for the game basically. So it's just kind of like, all right, we have to kind of just do what we have, and it's like, Kern, you're probably going to be on off tank. Zach, you're probably going to be on flex DPS. I think we had Alligator Andre on flex support at the time because Lechuga couldn't show up. And so I think we had, I can't recall if it was Seth or Harry on main support. But it was just like what we scrimmed for when we first got drafted versus like the week before the first game was completely different. And we're just like, we kind of just have to do what we have. So I didn't know what I was expecting. I was hoping to put up a better fight than just kind of losing 0-3 to WW, but
Yoink was unprepared to face a team of Wait What's caliber, and it was painfully obvious throughout the entire match. They were hard-stomped and just couldn't come together as the well-oiled machine they needed to be, the one upside being that they knew exactly what they needed to work on.
Yeah, because so when I got picked up, I was kind of just picked up just for my SR. I don't think I ever did any pugs with Yoinks or anything like that. So they really know who I was. Everything was kind of just in scrims, and I was new to the whole League Zero scene and everything. So they had Kern, who could play support and support and tank. So if you look at our first game, I kind of watched back up this morning. Our first game, we had Kern playing off tank and me on, I think on like May job, with May being powerful at the time, like those brawl compositions. So we messed around with like Kern, kind of experimenting with different roles. I think actually towards the end of the first game was when like I first started to play off tank, and I think after that it was kind of more cemented with me in off tank and Kern getting in. But then with me on off tank, they tried to figure out where Kern would fit with supports, because at the time we had Ali playing support, and eventually he moved over to DPS. But like there was so much like shuffling, just trying to like fit everyone, because it was like I could play DPS and tank, Kern could play tank and support, Ali could play support and DPS. Like people were like everywhere, so it was really just trying to match combinations until we found what we thought worked best for us.
Yeah, it was a really weird time because Yoink as a team, everyone is very respectful of each other, and everyone knew that everyone's in school, they have obligations, the clubs, whatever, and everyone just trying to make it work. So I think I was there pretty much fully dedicated because I dropped out of high school sports to play on the team and just to play Overwatch. So I had all the free time I needed. But I know a lot of other people had trouble finding time.
For the most part, the team wasn't super down on themselves about the first loss. Yoink knew they were fighting an uphill battle against one of the stronger opponents in their division, so they chalked it up to a learning experience and began to fix what they could leading into week 2.
I've always been super, in pretty much every community event, I've been super sort of like in my own little circle. Like I'll pay a lot of attention to my team and my team only for the most part. So for players that were like toxic. Like I remember Wait What being known as toxic, but I don't even remember like how they were toxic just because I didn't bother looking at whatever Discord chats they were yapping in or whatever match chats they were typing in. I just didn't even notice it really. And I didn't get any word from like people who were upset by it, so I don't think that was really an issue. But yeah, I think we knew that the first week was going to be scuffed just because of the scheduling issues and whatnot. So, and obviously it didn't affect us too badly.
Unfortunately for Yoink, Week 2 would prove to be an even harder stomp than the first. The Shanghai Sellouts were, without a doubt, the strongest team in the entire division at the time, and our heroes were still playing catch-up after a bad first few weeks of team building. Despite 2 rough losses, and not a map win to their names, they didn't lose too much faith in each other, however.
I think I know we like started off with like the 2 losses between Wait What and Shanghai, but those are the only 2 teams we actually only lost to in the entire season. Like I think the beginning like losses were just those teams got a better start kind of things. Like obviously as you mentioned, we had rougher scrim schedule, all the kinds of roster swapping, trying to figure out roles, so that by the time we did hit the ground running, we had kind of already somersaulted, whereas everyone else had landed on their feet.
I think within Yoink, I didn't really get that vibes. Like people I was talking to within League Zero, a few of them would like kind of project that onto Yoink, but within the team itself, no. I think people were still pretty hopeful.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, but Yoink, I mean, I kind of drifted away, but I know everybody else in Yoink still is like, the core of Yoink is still, they still talk every day. I think the personalities just clicked together and we just became like really good friends, and we would like talk every night, we play games. So I don't think there was really any sour mentality. For the people who didn't stick with Yoink, like I'm not really sure who it was, but there was a few people who didn't work out and they wound up like leaving, or they just weren't consistent. But no, I remember us like just being logical about it. We knew we didn't have a consistent lineup. People couldn't make it in the beginning, but we just got our stuff together and kept going.
One of the big causes for the inconsistency in the roster up until this point was trying to slot Kernmaster in. As we stated before, his comms were immaculate, but mechanically speaking, there were stronger options in the tank role. Luxie was locked into the main tank starting spot, and Zakatar was a formidable off-tank in his own right. While we may now be in the days of 5v5, anyone who was around during the original Overwatch will know how disruptive it was to be constantly swapping around tank duos.
Yeah, I was always a big fan of comms. Like, it was almost more important sometimes. And I don't know if it was more so mechanically weaker. I guess that's how you would put it. I'm always like glass half full type of person. So I wouldn't call him mechanically weaker. It was just that he was strong in a different way. And, you know, Kern signed up as main tank and we had Luxie, who was the first rounder as main tank as well. So it was hard because Luxie was really good. Kern Master talked a whole lot. So yeah, then eventually he got over to support. Like, I don't know if it was by the end of the Yoink season. And even nowadays he's on it. But yeah, kind of shifted his career just because we needed him to play alongside Luxie.
Eventually, the team started to experiment with moving Kern out of the tank role and onto main support. In theory, it would work since that role needed to ult track and fight plan anyways, though it would mean destabilizing the somewhat consistent lineup of Deflex and Lechuga Yoink had up until that point.
I know for a lot of the time, I wasn't like the most involved in like overall team stuff. It was kind of like I would show up, and if I was being told to like play, I'd play. However, I do know that like the available positions, we like after the first couple of weeks, we were feeling really strong with like a me Luxie tank line, having Raging Cool in on DPS, and I think we were trying to figure out our other DPS slot, and then like the supports was kind of where our shuffle was between those ones. Kernmaster, like amazing talent, like just mechanically, he's really good, right? Especially like at the time, like he had good mechanics. He's only gotten better from there. I don't know what to say. He's kind of popped off. But I think like the big thing we got was the comms, having the ult tracking, whereas like that's something now that like I take for granted for a lot of teams. But at the time, it was I remember just being blown away, being like having someone that could just like, oh yeah, this is the ultimates they have, and then for us to be able to work off that. I think that was like the biggest thing with having Kern on like the main support, was that he could actually act as that like caller, that comms in the back.
Honestly, I have no idea how he ended up on support, but yeah, his comms are just absolutely insane, so it was just a perfect role for him.
While it meant that the starting roster remained in flux, Kernmaster on main support meant that the team had a more viable option to keep their superior comm structure. Yoink finally managed to grab a win versus Overcharged and prove that their rough start wasn't going to define their entire season.
Well, yeah, just getting a first win in general always feels good. Like, no matter what is happening being on the 0-win column is the not a fun experience. So having a super good win felt really good. That week, I'm pretty sure Acid couldn't show up. So we actually had Alligator Andre on Flex DPS and I think Raging Cool on Hitscan. And that's when Spork came back as well because she had been out the first 2 weeks. So this is when we started like looking at a different support line and having Alligator Andre stop playing Flex support for us. And that's when me and Spork became like the duo for support. And I think it just felt a lot easier for us to do stuff. Not saying that Ali was a bad support, however, we felt a lot more coherent as a team with Spork and I as the support line. Because she can just focus on being the flex support and healing, and I can focus on talking. Because me and Ali, we used to kind of like bounce off each other as comms, but Luxie and Zakatar were also big in calming. So we had like 4 people that were trying to talk, and 4 is a bit too much for trying to like figure out what the hell's happening. So having 3 kind of narrowed it down slightly, because Ali on DPS had to focus more on just getting a wall down, or like, I don't remember the other DPS in that meta, but making sure DPS do DPS things, you know?
Of course, while the team started to claw their way back out of the rut they found themselves in from the first 2 weeks, the seemingly constant game of musical chairs of the support role didn't help. Just about every combination of Deflex, Lechuga, and Kernmaster was experimented with, and much to the team's dismay, there wasn't any clear answer as to who worked best.
Was I even in the game week 3? It might have been on May because of a Raging or Acid absent. But I think around that time, I was actually pushing Lechuga to be the starting flex support, because I had been informed that I would be a coach for ETD. So that's the big reason as to why we were figuring out, okay, Kernmaster can hit here, and we'll just run Kern Lechuga the entire time. Yeah, I'd gotten the DM from the director, and I informed Kurt, I'm like, yeah, it makes no sense to play me anymore, because I'm just not going to be there in scrims. So it all kind of like worked perfectly in a sense, but you know, we all just stayed here and we all just wanted to win. No one was really like squabbling, or we all had a drive.
One important thing to note about this period in Overwatch is that the old Shadow Dive and Shadow Brawl compositions reigned absolutely supreme in the meta. For the most part, this was a lot of fun for the majority of roles besides Flex Support, which was usually stuck on Moira, and then the Flex DPS, which had to play Mei. In Yoink's case, well, they had 2 DPS players which leaned slightly more towards hitscan, and neither of them were particularly thrilled to play the frozen version of Satan herself.
Yeah, as much as I don't remember the details, the Mei saga was big enough. And it was also, I think the reason why I remember this so much was because we added Accelerate to the roster to play Mei. And he's like, I think the only person who wasn't there on draft day that's like still around in the server as well. So yeah, it's just like a nice fun fact to know is we picked him up as the Mei player. But it was just a sort of like attitude thing. Like it wasn't a skill problem. They were both collectively like, I don't want to do it. Raging and Acid, they just neither of them wanted to. And I think it was Deflex who said like, even if I don't play this other person that I pick up that ended up being Excel, it would still be like incentive for the other 2 players to actually want to play it. And I think that's exactly what happened. We trialed Excel, he did pretty well, but then he never played a game because Acid all of a sudden wanted to play Mei again.
Eventually, it was Acid who bit the bullet, though that didn't come without some experimentation in the DPS lineup itself. A few of the early games even had Zakatar and Deflex fill in on the Mei, as Yoink's intended starters just didn't want to practice that hero as much as they probably should have.
Mei was boring. In that meta, Mei was literally just like, you wall, and then you freeze. That's literally it. You zone people off. I mean, it was cool, but it wasn't either of our things. I eventually, because I feel like it fit me, and I eventually got it. Because I mean, when it was Goats meta, I was the Brig guy, which is also a pretty boring role. But it kind of, I guess it translated, and I wound up sticking with Mei. I learned the zoning. I took the sacrifice.
I think I played the first game on Mei just because those 2, I don't know if they like didn't want to, or if like I had just done better in a scrim or something, but the team wanted to put me on Mei, and I was like, yes. Like the first game, but I thought oh my god, it does that. I don't know if it's better. It doesn't matter too much. You can still hear me, right? Okay, awesome. But yeah, like with the Mei, like I know like early team with our DPS. I think it was Captain Crunch or something like that, who we had been drafted, but I think it was like a Smurf or something. So we were down like a player in that sense, and then we were trying to like figure out who to like field into that role. And I know that we ended up picking up Excel for his Mei, but around the time we did that, I think it was Acid started learning the May character. So it was like we picked up Excel for May, but then like because of like the chemistry there and the fact that Acid was like performing on May, it was like, oh, kind of awkward. We don't need you anymore. And then like I know with Alligator Andre, I know he played a couple games on like DPS. Like he started on support and then he started to transition over into DPS, especially with his like a coaching role at UTD. Began to feel more confident playing it himself. So we tried him in for a couple of games, and I thought we did like fine with us. I don't actually know which ones we were, so maybe we lost.
It got to the point where Kurt wanted to nudge Acid and Raging to take their practice more seriously, which meant signing a backup DPS player to loom the soft threat of the bench over their heads.
Yeah, I think it was kind of just like we kind of hit a brick wall, whether it was like, I can't remember if it was in scrims or just in the match. So I think we just kind of like hit that wall and we're just kind of like, okay, something's gotta like change here, because like if that's kind of like the level we need to be at to like, you know, be a contender to win, because we're still 2-3. It's not like we're out or anything, but like at that point we gotta like kind of do something to try to improve ourselves so we can be at that level. It was kind of like, I don't want to say a moment of realization because that kind of came later, but it was kind of like the moment of like shock of like, okay, we're not as good as we thought we were.
Aside from Overcharged, Yoink was also able to take down High Society during Week 4. However, their last opponent for the first round robin of the season was the wildly unpredictable Powerhouse. This team is an entirely different story, but the short of it is that Powerhouse would go from the undisputed best team in Intermediate to a bunch of pushovers seemingly at random. Unfortunately for Yoink, Week 5 was one of Powerhouse's stronger weeks, so the concentrated power of the sun itself probably wouldn't have been enough to change the outcome here.
I felt like we couldn't focus on the game as much because we had so much going on internally. I think, like you said, like me and Acid were kind of just like, because at that time, like the meta and everything, like the DPS really kind of just like basically did their own stuff, because this was kind of at the point of hero bans, right? Yeah, so like with like everything getting banned week by week, we generally had like gone to like a idea where it's like, you know, our tanks and supports are always going to be together, but like generally the DPS can kind of just like go in and out depending on what we needed to do. We didn't really have to like do as much. We just had to make sure we coordinate the team. So I don't know, I remember after every scrim, me and Asa would just be like, so what's up? And I don't know, we kind of on our own island, and not in a bad way, just kind of like a solidarity way, as like, you know, the only two players that are like, well, I guess Zakatar as well, but like the only two players who are just kind of like here for the ride, like we can't really control anything.
While there wasn't a ton of drama throughout Yoink's season, right around the mid-season break, the unthinkable happened. Luxie went to management, asking to be traded away.
I honestly made that decision to make that announcement very selfishly at the time. Looking back, it was a very selfish decision to like kind of light a fire under them to figure their stuff out. And I was also a part that I actually did want to try and learn Vitalize and go with them. But I think that definitely, I saw a lot of activity, especially in the Discord chats. And I'm sure there was a bunch of talks behind the scene that I didn't see that just really got them moving, because they were like, oh shoot, some of our players aren't happy here. We need to try and figure something out or improve ourselves to make sure that we're worthy of having a tank in general.
As you can imagine, the team's very first draft pick asking to go to another team came as quite a bit of a shock. Not only that, but it threw the already unstable starting roster for a complete loop.
I think it was awkward with Luxie at the time, because he did say, hey, I want to be traded, and we were kind of like friends, so we were like, what, why? I think it came to understanding eventually, and then I don't remember too many details on that.
I remember it vividly because the night he requested to be traded was the night Doom Eternal dropped, and I was playing that when I heard about it, and I wanted to play the game, so I was still playing the game talking to Acid about like what we should do. So I have a decent enough memory of that, but I have enough anxiety to where I wanted to be prepared just in case he left, so I wanted to know like who we would get in return for him, and you know, depending on Luxie's attitude, we could start, you know, scrimming with whatever new squad and then get the trade going or whatever. A lot of what I was thinking about was just figuring out basically what our starting roster would look like minus Luxie plus no one, and just trying to figure it out from there. But yeah, it was really bad because there wasn't any good options really for us going into that trade, and it was more or less dependent on if Luxie wanted to leave or not. I'm pretty sure I let everyone know just because I wanted everyone to know. It felt like an important enough thing to where like in the world that Luxie leaves, I don't want everyone else to be delayed. I want everyone to know if this guy leaves and what it looks like and what to be prepared for. It just seems better competitively speaking that everyone's on the same page.
Actually, I think I was more in tune to the season out of any other league I've played in, but I wasn't like the most tuned in. But I do remember being a little worried about possibly losing our main tank, because I was like, if we lose essentially our leader, we're kind of just over. Like, it's kind of an essential person to keep.
Vitalize. That was Vitalize. I knew that Lexi had a bunch of friends on Vitalize. They wanted him in. You'll have to talk to him. I know you have. On like why he felt that way. Like as far as I was aware, it was just we're all here to have fun, right? At the end of the day, it's to have fun, right? There's it's a tournament and everything, but we want to enjoy ourselves. From what I remember, that was what he wanted to do. He wanted to play with some friends he had on that team. I remember thinking when he was like that, I was like, oh shoot. Especially going into that middle week, right? We started to kind of really hit our ground after week 7 here, those 3 wins in a row, especially that win against Powerhouse. I had just kind of started to feel like things were matching together. We had put our roster together, and I wasn't ready for us to go back into having to find a new main tank and then rebuild synergies and level everything up from there, trying to work from the beginning, especially with someone that we had seen work. I know that Luxy was hyper aggressive, which I thought worked well for us. I tend to be hyper aggressive too, so I could definitely support him on that off tank role. I don't think it worried too much into the games. I don't think it factored a whole ton. We did play against teams. The teams that we lost to were the teams we had already lost to before, so it wasn't exactly anything new or surprising. I think it put a little a rift in the team. There was a little bit of worry, but I thought it smoothed out pretty quick.
In an attempt to salvage the situation and prepare for that worst-case scenario, the team picked up Kai to fill in the soon-to-be vacant main tank position. On paper, this was a good pickup. Kai had been around previously in Season 1 and was a relatively high rank for the division. However, nothing was allowed to be easy for Yoink at this point in their season.
So I fully remember Kai. We picked up Kai with the thought that Luxy was going to leave. I vibed great with the team. He vibed well with Lechuga, which was also a big point. We trialed Hunter 27 King at one point, and it was just a trial to trial. Most of the team was like, no, we don't want him on the team. He doesn't vibe well with Lechuga. He doesn't vibe well with us. So Kai was the complete opposite. He was good at the game. He vibed well with us, and we could work him in very easily. He matched skill level. And so we brought him onto the team, and I think we scrimmed with him once or twice, and he just completely ghosted us. I was like, where the heck is this guy?
Keep forgetting about that one because he kind of ghosted us. He was pretty all right, but yeah, and then Lexi came back anyway, and then he just, straight up just stopped appearing in our Discord channel just one day. It was pretty early on. I'm pretty sure it was the first week after we signed him. It was very strange behavior from Kai, but he was a pretty all right player. I'll give him that. Or at least I remember him as a pretty all right one, so...
Amidst all the drama surrounding Luxy's request to be traded away, the musical chairs being played with Yoink's support lineup started to be the main issue holding their synergy back. It didn't really matter who was chosen to be the dedicated starters, but it had to be someone.
I don't know if it was necessarily a roster swaps to the support position. Part of it was that I was super insecure. You'll ask that everyone on Yoink. We'd have scrims and I'd finish. I'd be elevate, it's over. I'm being benched for the rest of the time. I'm not gonna get played ever again. But I think that was more of me. I think I do think the backline swaps was, I was just trying to figure things out. I know that I thought that Spork was mechanically better than Ali on support, but she was very quiet. I remember lots of situations where, as our flex support, we would need Spork to or / Lechuga to let us know what's happening, whether being died. Especially as me on off tank, where I need to be able to no, I would play with her on 200%, and I would still wouldn't hear, and I'd be I didn't know that you were in trouble. I couldn't come and kill. So it was kind of a mix between the mechanical skill of Lechuga and then also Ali being able to talk more.
While there were some talks in the intermediate team management channels about trading Luxy away to teams like Vitalize, High Society, or even Overcharged, nothing really materialized. No one was willing to part with good enough players to make the trade worth Yoink's time. Eventually, Luxy decided to recommit to the team for the remainder of the season, which, as you can imagine, pulled a huge weight off the shoulders of everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, personally at least, I was thank goodness. I really didn't want to deal with all the headache because it felt like that would have severely hurt the chances, especially because he was, he was going into this as the first overall pick, and he was playing out of his mind.
By the time the dust settled and Luxy was firmly planted back in Yoink's camp, it was just past week 7, and they had once again lost to Wait What in the Shanghai sellouts. That placed them at a measly 2-5 with little hopes of qualifying for the playoffs, at least not without a miraculous late season run.
Yeah, I mean, we had gotten a good starting roster settled with the Yoink that you are aware of now, and we had brought in the competition mostly. I think it was just Excel that helped Acid and Raging step up as well. But yeah, that lit a fire underneath Acid, and from scrim results, we were just confident that we were doing well. We weren't worried. We were like, guys, this is still winnable. We're 2-5, and these next couple teams are very beatable.
Despite their backs up against the wall, Yoink didn't seem to let the pressure get to them. They knew they had what it took, they just needed to iron out those last few details, namely the ever-looming question about their support line.
I remember, going into that game, for both teams, it was kind of like a loser goes home, essentially, because the loser, if you lost that game, it was, nearly impossible for them to make playoffs. And so we just kind of had, our backs against the wall. And, I noticed a lot of teams I'm on have go really well with that mindset. So I think just playing with our backs against the wall and, I don't want to say nothing to lose because we have everything to lose, but, playing to win the game, nothing else matters. It worked out well for us.
Now, up until this point, we've mentioned quite a few times how the team struggled to deal with the question of the 3 dedicated support players, and how they had been a revolving door ever since Kern was moved off tank. However, we haven't discussed a ton about how the support players themselves felt during this weeks-long period. As you can imagine, it wasn't very fun to lack synergy after 3/4 of the season had already passed. By this point, Kernmaster was relatively locked into the main support role due to his comms, which left Lechuga and Deflex in the awkward spot of competing for the starting flex support spot. We'll talk a little bit about Deflex and his perspective in a minute, but Lechuga went through a tough loss streak in competitive around this time, which led to a misunderstanding with the team management, leaving her to ride the bench for a few stressful days.
I mean, I was pretty sad being benched for Allie. It was I don't know how much they've told you about that issue, but for some reason there's a miscommunication where they're like, she doesn't want to play, put me in instead. But I was just like, man, they think I suck and they don't want me anymore, and why am I getting benched for Alligator Andre right now? So I was mentally boomed because I was getting benched and I didn't know why, and then they were putting him in over me for reasons that were made up, so I didn't even know they were I didn't even know why. I was boomed in comp because I was losing all my games and de-ranking really fast, and I'm just when my team starts benching me, I'm like, man, they think I suck.
What made the misunderstanding with Lechuga even more awkward from Deflec's perspective is that he had already wanted to move more towards a coaching position. By this point, he was already working as a coach for the University of Texas at Dallas, and recognized that taking himself out of the equation as a player might alleviate some of the drama Yoink suffered.
I know there was some awkwardness. I don't think it was ever directly brought up to me. If it was, I just don't have the memory of it at this point. Hindsight, I can understand why they were awkwarded out, because someone lower ranked than all of them was trying to coach them. And then it was brought up. Yes, that triggered memories. There was a conflict of interest at the start before I officially benched myself, because we had thought Lechuga was a tad burnt out. And so I was like, hey, I can still play the game. And that's where the conflict of interest came to, where it was okay, are you going to be a coach or are you going to be a player? Now, I'm not sure about the being coached by someone on the same team as them was causing them trouble, but I do know that I was causing issues trying to step in as a player when I already said I'm going to coach. So that's when I took an official backseat, and I was like, just let Lechuga game.
While the move was much appreciated from management's perspective, it did create some mixed emotions within the team itself. Nothing major from the sound of it, but just enough to make things a little awkward while everyone adjusted to the idea of their former teammate now being a coach.
I saw that as pretty much the only option we had to kind of dedicate ourselves, because having a 7-man roster, that won't work. We need a consistent 6 players to be on the field at all times to get any kind of results. But him making that choice, he did kind of force himself into a coach role of forms, but he was, I don't remember if this is at the time or it was a goal of his to be a coach at some point. I know he went on to coach at his college in Dallas, but it was kind of interesting. I've never had, even in my esport, 4+ years of esports experience now, I've never had a player just go straight from player to coaching like that. It was a very interesting, and he brought valuable insight. But I think our main coach, Kurt, was expecting to run the whole thing by himself. And Ellie just kind of showing, oh, yeah, hey guys, I got some extra material for you today. That sometimes kind of conflicted what Kurt had to say. And there were times in like arguments in call, in practice about what the right play was. And there was like everyone's inputs got in and it was all messy. It did kind of mess up the practice flow a little bit, but it also brought like good insight onto why decisions are made, and it's not just Kurt is the god's voice, bringing in some extra insight and getting us to think for ourselves, more importantly.
It also brought some drama at the time because some other people was like, oh, I don't want to be coached by like another player, right? Because they're all seen as like Diamond Master players as like relative equals. They don't want to like have this random roster member just like try to get a power move on everyone. But he was also Deflex was working, I think he was just starting to work at UTD for their collegiate Overwatch stuff and being a coach there. And he has now since had a pretty successful career in that, which is really funny to look at hindsight because, like I said, so many people were like kind of against that idea, but I was fine with him, trying to take a step back because, doing that collegiate program as well as college, he just had less free time. So he just spent more of his time just coaching wherever he could possible.
With Deflec's insistence on coaching versus playing, Yoink was finally left with a dedicated starting 6, and it only took him 8 weeks to do it.
I think it did. I can't tell you what, and I don't know if you happen to know. I know we hired. I say hired. We didn't pay any money. It was one of Kurt's friends, Crimson. Yeah, who was our coach, and I don't know when he came in, but like he really like technically speaking, he didn't do a ton. Like the amount of like coaching we did get was maybe like less in quantity, but very high in quality. Even as basic as it was, like we struggled, because it was like a very brawl heavy season. We were very everywhere with our brawls, and I think we did stacking. We did like a scrim where it was like we would stand on Luxie and we like stack on Luxie and we would just make sure everyone was standing on like as close to like the character model of Reinhardt as we could get, and then we would all go in. It was like something very small like that, where like even if the fight like it devolves, right, as everyone is going off on their own thing and getting kills and it explodes, it gets crazy. Even just having that like ability to like start together, getting that everyone on the same note, having everyone like synergized, having that roster come together as we had all experienced, right? We knew the stack on Luxie when we called them to go in together, like knowing that timing, making sure that we're all following Luxie as closely as possible as we can for as long as we can. Once we did get that 6 together, we did really start to mesh.
Scrims started to shape up better with more progress being made now that everyone knew who the starting lineup was. With the help of their coaching staff, namely Crimson and Deflex, Yoink was making good progress and fast. Even still, the pressure to make playoffs was rapidly mounting. With a 2-5 record for the season, they needed to win every single game from here on out if they had any chances of making the cut.
I remember the High Society one the most, just because at that point we were doing I don't know how well known of a joke this is outside of Yoink, but we rebranded the server every week. And it started out really stupid. Like I changed the icon and I just removed the Y, so it said Oink, and then I removed the first letter of every player's name, so it was like Sid, Echuga, and stuff like that. And for the High Society one, I remember changing it to like something about like beating High Society. I can't even remember what the exact branding was, but I remember getting us hyped up for that High Society game. Like, guys, we got to beat the crap out of them so we can get into playoffs.
I think things were falling into place. It was like a little, like I said earlier, kick in the butt around like week 6, week 7. Like, hey, if we don't start winning, we're not going to make the finals. So I think we definitely did like double down on scrimming. I remember some nights we would scrim like double blocks. We had a coach, Crimson. I don't know if anyone else mentioned him, but he helped us a lot throughout to get actually better as a team and not just play as 6 individual people, but rather play as a unit. Because we had all the pieces, we just didn't know how to put them together.
Now, despite the entire league completely writing Yoink off as the first casualty of the playoffs cutoff, the team itself wasn't super stressed about their uphill battle. They were sitting in dead last for the entire Intermediate B division, and yet if you asked them, they had it in the bag. Sure, there was some pressure about having to perform, but in hindsight, the confidence was crazy.
I'm gonna be real, I don't remember much about the game days, but I do know that we were hyped after each and every single one of them. We were scrimming, I want to say 4 to 5 times a week, and yeah, just a lot of scrimming, going to the drawing board, seeing what we can do next. I believe around that time we had also gotten Crimson in as coach, and he taught us about stacking. Yeah, Diamond players did not know how to stack then, and so that took us up quite a bit. I don't remember the games much specifically, but the OC one, I know we had as like very, very high importance. And when we won that game, we felt like we were on top of the world. And then the High Society one felt even greater.
The first step was defeating Overcharged again, which was a team that had their own peaks and valleys throughout Season 2, somewhat of a close game, but in the end, Yoink managed to close it out in 3-1 fashion, which, by the way, was their first game all season that went to Map 4. They just really didn't want to play 2CP apparently. Anyways, from there they went on to face High Society, which was the main obstacle standing between Yoink and the playoffs. Only the top 4 teams from each subdivision of Intermediate qualified to the postseason, and High Society was sitting pretty in 4th. While there were other factors that could affect their chances, all Yoink could do in their end was win and hope for the best.
Yeah, I think I'd be lying if I say there wasn't any like extra pressure, but also like we weren't gonna like really like put down ourselves just because we couldn't get to a map 5. Like it was kind of just like we just gotta go in and take care of business and we'll all be good. And I mean that is what happened.
I mentioned it briefly already, but I think it's important to note just how little faith everyone else had in Yoink by this point in the season. Literally everyone was surprised when the math showed they could technically make it to playoffs, and that exact scenario started to play out before our very eyes.
And with that, we'll move over to Intermediate B, and this one I think is going to be rather interesting. There's a lot of potential here, aside from probably Yoink, to make a serious run for the playoffs.
I'm going in, bitch. I'm going in. I don't give a fuck. I'm going in. I'm going in. I'm tired of fucking losing, dude. I'm tired of losing. I'm tired of being a bitch. I'm tired of being a sorry, sad-ass motherfucking organization. I don't give a fuck.
Community memes aging like milk aside, the team had a pretty good laugh about how surprised the rest of the community was, especially when Yoink themselves felt like this was all just a foregone conclusion.
I personally had a big ego and we beat them once, this game will be easy. Clearly it wasn't as easy. I think we had our little scare when we dropped a map to them, but I personally was a little ego on that one.
While the previous 2 matches were one hell of an accomplishment given the circumstances, this last game of the regular season had the potential to be the most harrowing encounter yet. Powerhouse had always been an insanely unpredictable team, beating Shanghai Sellouts one week and losing to High Society just the week prior. And no, I'm not kidding. Volatile would be an understatement, and while Yoink had a lot of momentum, it was Powerhouse. I don't think anyone, including the teams in question, knew what was going to happen.
We definitely knew that people were expecting Overcharge. We were the underdogs. And our mentality was like, fuck it, we ball. We're going to win this game. And honestly, it was a really fun game. And we did the best we could. But like, at least my mentality was not shaken. We went into that game giving it our all and wanted to win.
Much the same as when they were 2-5, Yoink expressed a lot of confidence going into their potential final match ever. This game would decide everything about their playoffs fate. They managed to leapfrog over High Society to steal 4th place, but they were only in the lead by 1 match and 1 map win. Faltering here could send all their hard work straight into the gutter.
Overcharge was a big moment because if you look at like the first 7 weeks, they're all 3-0s. I think we had like this thing, like if we didn't win the first map, we lost the game because we were like, oh, we have a curse. And I don't know if anyone else mentioned that. We lost the first game against Overcharge, or we lost one of the games, but it was like one of the first 2 or 3. So then we were like, oh, great, now we're going to lose the game. Or we were like, oh yeah, we broke the curse. So it was like, that was a big moment. And then I think just from there, we kind of just kept going.
Of course, there were some concerns about the pressure and the question of which Powerhouse would show up to game day, but for the most part, Yoink kept their spirits high. They'd been practicing like crazy, and they knew they had what it took to go all the way.
I was just scared because I originally had thought they were like good, but clearly we did not have too much trouble with that, I guess. I also don't remember that game though, so... I of course believed in Yoink, love Yoink, but everyone was like, they're the best team, they're so good, blah blah blah, and I was like, I don't know about winning this one, guys. Of course, I didn't say that. That'd be kind of awful, but...
Ironically, Powerhouse didn't put up much of a fight, and Yoink managed to clinch their spot in the playoffs. Good thing too, because High Society clean swept their own Week 10 game, meaning they were poised to overtake Yoink once again if any mistakes happened. But that now meant that Yoink was lined up to face their first opponents from the Intermediate A subdivision, and the number 1 seed as well, Papega Parrots. While Intermediate A was generally seen as the weaker of the two intermediate subdivisions, Pepega Parrots was universally agreed on as one of the teams that could do some damage in the playoffs. Yoink really didn't know what to expect, and as such they prepared harder than ever. They weren't about to let this last month of blood, sweat, and tears go to waste.
I don't think we'd necessarily prepared against Pepega specifically. Like I had mentioned, I don't know about the team. I was feeling very confident about things going into that Pepega game. I was very fired up, and I think Kizgo won off tank roll star too, and obviously off of the record. And I don't think at the time, like looking back, I was I definitely didn't play to the point of winning that role. But I'm playing off tank. I want to win that.
While they had one hell of a run to even make it to the quarterfinals, Yoink knew they had a lot of work ahead of them if they wanted to make it any further in the playoffs. The team focused a lot on the fundamentals and tried not to worry too much about what Pepega Parrots would play.
I remember by that time we were scrimming 4.2, 4.3 K teams. So we were pretty confident going into that. I know there was a big thing that season, Division A isn't as good as Division B. Division B, everyone was saying was more stacked. Going into Pepega Power, I think we did actually review a VOD, and it did help us get some strategies, but overall, I'm pretty sure the main strategy we went with was just what we were strong with. Because I remember in previous seasons, definitely trying to work around, working around how other people play. But we figured this, we talked about it, we got coached, we were set with our Reaper May. I think that's the main thing we went with that time. And then we also did the Soldier Ash, if I remember correctly, the Soldier Ash double shield, which were our two strongest lineups. So it was definitely going into that, we were all right, it doesn't matter, we're a unit, we got this.
Well, we were going up against the number 1 seed Pepega, so that was it's kind of front loading all the hard work, right? Going into that situation, we're okay, we got to beat this team. It should be pretty hard. There's also plenty of memes about our division being harder though, and Pepega were from the Division A. So we were, stipulating some misinformation maybe about the divs being harder or whatever. We were just kind of riding that storyline and just riding our high of the 3-game win streak. And like I said, I had the belief the entire time. So as far as I know, it was just, the truth coming out.
Now, if you know anything about the Season 2 Pepega Parrots, it's that they were a pretty funny team. The roster was made up of a bunch of characters, and for the most part they breezed through the season in the Intermediate A subdivision. There were definitely times when they took games serious, but that's not an adjective you could use to describe their season very often. So the fact that some of Pepega's players sought out private coaching from Natter was a bit out of the ordinary compared to their public perception. But you can't really blame them for wanting to improve, and there's nothing wrong with seeking out help from one of the most reputable coaches at the time, except for the fact that Yoink somehow found the VOD review. Yes, I'm dead serious.
I don't remember where it came out from, somewhere just in a Discord channel, they were talking about it, and I was just that's kind of crazy. I was more surprised that someone would spend the money to pay for coaching and not only just a community league, but intermediate on it. I was dang, that is commitment to the role right there. I don't think it mattered too much. I know I had gone back. This is it's still forever ago, but I had gone back and rewatched the Natter VOD, and a lot of the stuff that was kind of more just fundamentals. So weirdly enough, while VOD reviewing the VOD review, it was also a VOD review for us to kind of get more of fundamentals, how comps work and things like that down.
Deflex found it was Ali Deflex Alligator Andre. He found the video of that because he was just going through Natter, and he's wait, that's Pepega Parrots. So he brought the video to us, and it's this is really comedic. So what he did is he took notes, and he was looking through the VOD to talk about what Pepega does. Now that rumor somehow got around the league, and they were holy shit, Yoink is prepping so much for Pepega, when in reality, most of our team didn't really even pay attention to what he was talking about, the flex. He was giving us information, and we honed in on some of what comps they're gonna play and if they play aggressive or passive, but we didn't take it into too much of our idea of what we need to do for the comp.
While the majority of Yoink didn't seem to care too much about VOD reviewing the VOD review, their DPS line in particular was coming across an all too familiar problem. You see, Echo was just released onto the competitive ladder about a week before playoffs started, meaning that she'd been available for teams to use in League 0. But, much like their issues with Mei, neither Acid nor Raging Cool wanted to learn the new hero. So instead of trying to fast learn a character as complex as Echo, Raging Cool took the time to devise a different strategy.
That was Acid and Ragene's doing. They were like, all right, we're running into the same problem where none of us want to play the like good character for some reason. They didn't want to play Echo. So they're grandiose, like, this is such a stupid plan. But Soldier Ash, and I was like, you know what? I don't have any theory for this character. It just came out, so like, go for it, team. And like 99% of it was just the belief of it working, I think. They just really believed in the comp, so they just aimed really well on those heroes and just did really well for some reason. They thought they were smart, so I think they just played better. So, you know, whatever works. I think it was fine on my end to just like go for it, even though it doesn't make that much sense, just because they really believed in that comp for some reason. They were like really high into it, so I was letting them run with it.
But yeah, as for like the composition thing, we had kind of like heard that Echo was really good, but like I don't think either of us really wanted to learn it at that time because we had been playing a lot of double hit scan and like Pharah and Junk as like and like Doomfist and Reaper. So like nothing that would really like translate to the flexibility you needed for Echo. And so we kind of just ignored it because I know we played Mercy a lot in the season, just pocketing like Mere Acid on hit scans or Pharah or something, and it just kind of worked out well because me and Acid just had the we're gonna diff you mindset all the time, and it kind of just worked out.
Preparations complete and training well underway, Yoink was about as ready as they could possibly be to take on the highest seed from their rival intermediate subdivision. However, in the hours leading up to the match itself, Kernmaster started to experience some technical difficulties.
I literally just recalled something right before the Pepega Parrots game. Because, I mean, a lot of shit was going on for Pepega. But I actually remember my computer had gotten... I don't remember exactly what happened, but every time I would open up Overwatch, it would be at like 3 frames per second. And I literally had no idea what happened. So, like, I want to say 2 hours before the match, I hard reset my computer. I completely fucking flushed out everything. And we had to delay the game, like, I think 20 minutes, like something not egregious, but we definitely delayed the game for me to download Overwatch on my shitty computer because something had happened where I couldn't play the game. And so we didn't get a warm up, and our idea was like, holy shit, what had happened. Like, everything feels like it just had gone wrong. And the fact that we were able to like go in there and completely dominate the 3 maps that we did was like, we were super happy about that.
Thankfully, the tech issues didn't seem to dampen Yoink's spirits, and they pretty decisively stomped Pepega out of the playoffs. A massive upset on paper, Yoink would be moving on to the semifinals to face Wait What in the hopes of making it all the way to the grand finals. Except, that's not quite what happened. Intermediate A fell unceremoniously out of the quarterfinals, almost unanimously. All except one team, that is. The clear favorites to win their own match, Wait What came across what had to be one of the most devious comebacks of the season. While Yoink had done what many thought improbable by the end of the regular season, the last hope of Intermediate A managed to put the final nail in the coffin to the boisterous bunch of Wait What, and their name was Vitalize.
Yeah, I mean, like, we just prepped for Genji. That's our thing. He basically only played Genji, I think, after a certain point of that series. So it's like, if we don't know how to play against Genji, I feel like we're going to lose, which I think is, like, the bane of a lot of teams, is prepping specifically for their opponents and, like, counter-stratting rather than, like, improving yourself. And so we prepped a lot, and it kind of was just, like, a bad week of scrims as well, because I think my internet that week had gone out like 2 or 3 times during scrims, and so when we would normally have like 6 to 8 hours of scrims for like a full week, we maybe had like 4.
Vitalize had been a bit of a dark horse throughout the season, always playing well enough to stay in the top 4 of their subdivision, but not often were they really thought about as a serious contender. That all changed after their ungodly upset in the quarterfinals. Something collectively clicked with their backs against the wall, and they came alive like no other. In particular, the player to look out for was Jolt, specifically on his pocket pick of Genji. It may have started as a desperation swap in the quarterfinals, but as it turned out, Shadow Brawl meta didn't really have a ton of great answers for a Nano Blade, meaning Yoink had a tough decision to make. Do they continue to just focus on their own game, or do they consider the insane ceiling of the cybernetic weeb that could potentially run the lobby?
We got really complacent and we had bad availability, so I think we only scrimmed like once, maybe twice that week. And going from like 4 to 5 scrims a week to 1, especially in the playoffs, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I think there were just a lot of nerves, and then everyone just let the nerves kind of charge their emotions in the scrims, and it was just unfortunate.
Vitalize definitely got into Yoink's heads, and Genji was at the forefront of their minds when considering counter-strats. You could probably hear minor recollections of it in those interview clips we just played. It was a singular focus bordering on brain rot. Stop the Genji. Unfortunately, the week between quarterfinals and the semis were wrought with problems for Yoink. Some of the main roster couldn't make it to any scrims due to scheduling issues, others had internet outages when it mattered most. The bottom line is that they were not feeling confident heading into this match. Almost the exact opposite of their disposition from the past month.
And this is when we looked at Vitalize and we're like, Jolt plays Pharah. We counter Jolt. We counter Pharah. And that's all we thought about. That we didn't think much outside that box. We thought, all right, they're going to play Pharah. We need to figure out how we play against Pharah. And that's how we tackled our scrims. You're right. We hard prepped for Genji and they pulled out Pharah. And that's why, okay, you know what? No, you're right. That jogged my memory. Yeah, I just had the wrong hero. We hard prepped for the Nano Blade Genji type shit.
While Yoink definitely hyper-focused on the possibility of Genji, to their credit, they did play really well when Jolt inevitably pulled it out. What they were not prepared for was this.
Yoink's support line with Kernmaster and Spork have been phenomenal over these playoff games.
I don't know, I think we forgot that, yeah, Jolt's known for his crazy oppressive Genji, but also it's Jolt, he can play more than one hero. And I don't know, I think we just weren't mentally prepared for anything unexpected. We kind of just went in set with what was going to happen, and then when that stopped happening, we got like a little tilted, I don't know.
Hard countering the Genji won Yoink a map when they were between a rock and a hard place. But, as it turns out, Jolt was good at playing more than just one hero. Our rambunctious protagonists were caught like a deer in headlights versus the flying menace, and it just felt like they couldn't find their footing. Dorado in particular was, well, it was a rough watch.
Yeah, I just remember us once the Pharah swap out come out, because like we weren't like inexperienced against Pharah players. Like Pharah's not meta, so we weren't expecting to really play against it all the time. But we knew how to deal with a Pharah player. But there's something in the way they played that against us, where I couldn't support my DPS and supports with a shield to properly take down the Pharah, and I couldn't manage that doing the tank duel and keeping the space that I needed to. So it was really those things of just, I think they fundamentally played better Overwatch than we did in that game. For whatever reason, because I do remember our comms being kind of like, oh, so mad at this Pharah. Like, especially our DPS were just so mad about the Pharah. And I think I was honestly as well, because I love playing Reinhardt. I want to swing at everything. I can't hit Pharahs in the sky unless I hit an insane fire strike. So there was something with that particular Pharah pick that just kind of tilted us, I think.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Didn't Yoink come up with this whole Ash Soldier comp just to avoid playing the Echo? Why not play double hit scan to counter the Pharah? Great question. One that I made sure to ask when I got these players in for interviews.
I actually remember exactly why. So Crimson, he coached us. The best way, if you do it properly on it's map specific though, the best way to counter the Pharah Mercy is to win the ground game, because if you focus on the Pharah Mercy, the Pharah is getting pocketed. So the chances of you killing the Pharah compared to the ground is a lot more slim. So we definitely opted for the fast-paced rhythm, and I think that's where we tried to take the rhythm back with the May Reaper. We were kind of just not flustered. We were just a little shaken, I guess, from the other maps. So it didn't work because we didn't have the coordination, we didn't have the focus. But technically, that should have worked if we just won the ground game.
A tale as old as time, stubborn to the bitter end. And technically, they did actually play Soldier Ash for a minute or two, and it worked, kinda. By that point in the series, Yoink was definitely tired and boomed. Playing the right composition is only about 10% of the journey to the victory screen. How you play it and your mentality is the other 90%.
The best way I can describe that match is like when you're on the edge of a cliff and you're holding on with your fingertips, and like you're not technically dead, but like it feels like at any point everything's just gonna drop dead. Yeah, so like we had that map when it like the series was fairly close, and then it got to Dorado and we were getting like spawn camp, and it was just rough the entire time. And I think like during that map it was just kind of like our mentality was just like, even though like there was still like 2 minutes left maybe and like we could still break out, it was everyone was kind of just boomed trying to figure out what to do against this comp.
While Yoink managed to avoid being hard swept out of the playoffs, they were forced to bow out much earlier than they would have hoped in 3-1 fashion. And to be honest, Dorado almost felt worse than getting swept, being spawn camped for like 2 minutes straight in the semifinals. Yeesh. But despite the devastating loss, the story of Yoink doesn't exactly end there. The matches were finally over, and the players had no reason to stick together, but, well, they wanted to.
Valorant came out at like a pretty like nice time. It was like right after the season ended. And Luxie got super obsessed with that. But I feel like some of the first memories I have of like post like League Zero season Yoink was just queuing up Valorant, like doing the stupid like farming the viewer beta drop thing and then like queuing up, and then yeah, it was just we never stopped pinging each other to ask if we wanted to play ranked basically. And then we ended up making another server just to like make it a little bit more exclusive after the season ended, and we didn't have to invite League Zero staff because the season ended and all that. So we made another server with basically just us, the main core, and then yeah, we've slowly been adding people since.
Yes, we have stayed as a group, and honestly, everyone from that team is still in like our current server. We're doing our 3rd year of Secret Santa, and we're getting that set up. Like we have stayed as a group, and we've met up multiple times. We've gone out and done things, different group ideas. Obviously, some people have come and gone that are like, I don't want to call them extras because that's super rude, but like we've had additive people, like connective friends. Like I brought in like Toasty and Fimi Jargo. Lechuga brought in Jaguar. Deflex brought in like iMustache. So there's an extended family of Yoink, but like us as a core, that team has stuck together and been able to like just be a friend group that's online instead of just like a team that happened 3 years ago. And it's really nice. It's happy to know that all of us were like thinking more as people instead of just like gaming opportunity. Because obviously it was a draft league. You want to get better. That's kind of the whole point. Dividing made this as like a big competition that like improves you. And we all wanted to improve, but at the same time we're new to this community. We want to find people that can engage and talk to us like every day. We can play comp with each other. We can talk about real life shit. And that was Kurt's purpose when he said he was drafting a team. He was like, I wanted to create like a group that like stuck together, that he like people that would enjoy the game and enjoy each other instead of just like leaving after the season ended type thing. And so it's really comforting to know that we were able to stick together for so long.
Yeah, I mean, Yoink is still really close. Love Yoink. They're awesome, amazing. Like, the loss kind of sucked. I think we stopped talking for like a week as everyone just mentally recovered from that. But then we started gaming again, and now we're celebrating almost 4 years together, so.
No, I mean, like I had mentioned, like, at the beginning when you were talking about, like, team synergy and stuff, like, we were all friends. Like, we'd played games, like, outside of scrims, like, we'd, like, talked, we'd, like, shared information. Like, we were tight, you know? It really, like, evolved. Like, crazily enough, you mentioned the, like, Luxie leaving. And I think, I don't know why he chose to stay. I like to believe that it was because of those bonds, where the friendships we had kind of created through that team were stronger to pull him in. After we lost, I can't remember, I think it was Owl Season 1 or something, or Owl Season 2. I don't know what was going on around there, but Soul Dynasty had lost, and 2 of their players were like crying, and they felt bad. And I remember thinking, I was like, really? I was like, they had a good season. I was like, why are they sad? I know I cried after we lost that game. I was very sad for our time together to kind of come to an end. Like with most teams, your season ends and you fade away. It's just another team in your repertoire of like teams you've played for. I know I was sad. Like I love the people I was with. I love everyone on here. They are like even now, like they're all my friends. Our season's over. We have no reason to get together, right? I think that's where a lot of teams tend to break up, if you want to say, or like they all go their different ways because there's no reason to stay together. You're not forced to. No one says, hey, you gotta come and talk with us or play games. Like you just kind of, you have to do it on your own. I know that like after I cried, like I kind of like took it down. Like I kind of went into a voice channel with a bunch of people. I don't know if Kern wants me to talk about this. You may have to ask him. I know that he was in tears. He was very sad. He was feeling the same way I was feeling. I remember telling him that was not the end of Yoink. We were too tight. We were too close all together for that to just be where we all say goodbye and go our separate ways. We were too much of friends. Like, I think by the time I had this talk, it had been 2 hours since the loss already. And still, like, the whole team was all in a voice channel talking. No one had really gone to, like, go do other stuff. We were all happy just to spend time together. And I think that's even still true today. We still are hanging on Discord. I know that people do movie nights. We play games together all the time. We still queue in Overwatch. Like, we've stuck together. And I don't think like the single loss or like the end of our season was what would have defined that.
While their season may have ended as awkwardly as it started, no one could deny that Yoink had a hell of a run. Going from an 0-2 record with 0 maps won to clawing their way through the playoffs as far as they did is nothing less than admirable. And more than that, they turned heads the entire way. Not just their tenacity, but Yoink's excitement and enthusiasm was infectious. You could tell that they loved every second of playing together, which made it that much more fun to watch their journey. At the time of their final curtain call, everyone loved Yoink. Well, maybe not high society, but everyone else for sure. What's more is that their kinship extended beyond that one season, and even beyond League Zero as a whole. Yoink would go on to compete in other tournaments, and in some cases, other esports entirely. In the 4+ years between Season 2 and the making of this video, they're still going strong. It's so rare to find a group that sticks together this tightly. Even in comparison to other friend groups in League Zero's history, Yoink goes above and beyond. Their dedication to fostering the environment they've created is enviable, and I hope they never take for granted just how special their efforts are to make a place they can call home.
Yeah, you've probably heard this a lot, but it's just like a family. I mean, we've all started to go our own ways because COVID, it was so much different, but it was kind of like a haven during the COVID times. Some people had their significant others. We had Yoink. And when it comes down to it, we knew that at almost any part of the day, we could jump into a VC and someone else would jump in and we'd be able to grind a game or chill while we do homework or something. And so even though we're not gaming as much anymore together, whether it's competitively or in our own VC, we're still Yoink. We have our own internal channels, hold each other close, talk to each other about IRL stuff. Or we're all trying to meet in person at some point. They're one of the first like true Overwatch families that I've had.
I do want to just take a shout out to League Zero for like providing this space to grow as like players and people and form teams like this. Like it's just an amazing community, and I really hope it continues. Yeah, but I think Acid and I are like cosmic brothers in some kind of way. There's just something there that it feels right. Like we're both huge Pokemon nerds on top of being no-life Overwatch players at the time. It feels right. I don't know. I feel very fortunate to have met these people through League Zero, and Yoink is an amazing community that I would not be the same person without.
I would say they're a lot of my really close friends, and I love talking to them and playing with them. And even though I barely have time to game these days, I still always look forward to when I'll have a chance to just go and chat with the Yoinkas and keep playing. And I don't know, I love them all so much. I couldn't imagine life without them, honestly. Like, I don't know who I'd be without having them there.
I mean, like, as far as I know, we're like the only team that's like still like really close friends. Like, they're definitely like, as for like my online friends, like my closest online friends. Like, and I think everyone would say that about each other. Like, we like constantly interact. I know there's some other teams where like maybe like 4 or 5 people still hang out or something, but like basically everyone like still like talks and interacts, and like, you know, you may not hear from someone for a little bit, but then they'll come and chat or come in VC and like talk a lot. So it's kind of just like a friendship that formed from like that team, because I think we had a lot of fun going like back through the season rather than like just kind of splitting after the season was over, which a lot of teams do. But I think, I don't know, just like being able to come back and like, you know, make playoffs, make semis when we were like had our backs against the wall kind of like brought us closer together.
I would say it had a very large impact on my life. I had to step away from the team like afterwards, just because like some mental health issues, and it did show me though that like the value of having true friends, and like there are people in the world that are like good people, and there's people in the world who will look out for you and like look out for your best interest. So it was definitely, even if I wasn't in the best mental state afterwards, it gave me hope going forward in my future endeavors, whatever was after Overwatch. That team changed my life, I guess I could say.
I also remember, like, at the end of Yoink, like, with how bad the OD run went. I remember, because that OD team ended at some point during the season, and I remember really liking a lot of those guys. But then the OD season ended, and then we all just kind of, like, fizzled out for the most part. So, like, when Yoink ended, I thought it was just going to be more of the same, even though we were super friendly with each other, because it just didn't seem any different from any other team. Yeah, it just, like I said, we didn't stop talking. And at this point, I see him as just any other group of friends. I've only ever met one of them in person, but I have met one of them in person. So yeah, at this point, after all these years, and we've had to share our addresses with each other so we could do the Secret Santa and shit like that. So yeah, it just feels like another group of friends, and we're all looking forward to meeting up with each other. And me meeting Excel is not the only time people have met each other within Yoink. I'm pretty sure Kern, Deflex, and Lechuga all went out somewhere on the West Coast. They're all vaguely over there, and they did something I can't even remember where. But yeah, like I said, at this point, they just feel like any other group of friends to me.